Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to another episode of the Saturdays in Stores podcast, brought to you right here on the Crossover Media Network. My name is Kanaye, and today let's talk about UConn and their win over Texas this past Sunday. And we're also going to preview their big time matchup against Gonzaga tomorrow night, or on the date of this recording tomorrow. But by the time you guys are seeing it today, against Gonzaga at Madison Square Garden at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. UConn's coming off a 76-65 win against Texas, which happened on Sunday. I think some really big thing was getting Alex Karaban back after he had sat the last two games suffering the concussion, which went down in the Dayton game, which was the final game of the Maui Invitational. So, yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about just kind of some of the things I saw, some of the improvements I think we've seen in this game, and as opposed to the games leading up to the Texas matchup. And then, yeah, we'll preview the Gonzaga game. But before we get into that, if you like this podcast, if you like the content you see on this channel, tell your friends, rate, review, subscribe, engage with the content any way you can. It all helps with YouTube's algorithm so that we can get this content out to more people. So let's not waste any more time and let's talk a little bit about this Texas game. So, again, as I mentioned just earlier, Alex Caravan's first game back since suffering the concussion against Dayton. And I mean, he absolutely filled up the stat sheet: 21 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists. I mean, he did it all. And I think he picked up 2 blocks as well. And I mean, that's just what he is. He's the go-to guy. He is the guy on this UConn team now, where he was kind of more of a glue guy, kind of played a role in the past years. But he is the team's leader this season. And he's really done a good job and just really improving in the ways he needed to improve. I talked about this in an episode a few weeks back where it's so evident that he really worked and nailed in the things that he needed to work on going into this past offseason. He needed to improve defensively. And I mean, he's looked like one of our better defenders so far this year. In terms of his timing and his anticipation when going up for blocks, that's why he's racked up so many this season. And additionally, just not growing, becoming more than just a catch and shoot guy, which he has been the past 2 seasons. He's done a lot better of a job attacking the rim, attacking closeouts, kind of blowing by defenders a little bit. Not necessarily with his athleticism, but more so with kind of just his IQ and ball knowledge. But on top of that, just talk about the shooting a little bit. I mean, he's hitting shots this year that I don't think he would have hit the last 2 seasons, specifically in terms of his ability to hit shots off the dribble now, or being able to shoot a little bit more off movement as opposed to what he was able to do even last year when as well as he played. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that's just been a really, really big thing for this UConn team and for Alex Caravan specifically. This is why he came back to school instead of staying in the NBA draft, where he probably could have been a top 35 pick if he had stayed. I think he legitimately believes that he has a chance to make himself into a first round pick, probably in the 25 to 30 range. And I'm right there with him. I think he's fully capable of doing that. And I think he will end up going somewhere in that range in this year's draft. So that's going to be fun to watch just to see how Alex Caravan continues to show how much he's improved from last season to this year as the season goes on, as kind of the go-to guy on this team this year. In terms of like other contributions during this Texas game, we saw a lot from the two bigs, Samson Johnson and Terrace Reed. I mean, it just, again, with the fouls, I mean, Terrace Reed, he picks up his second foul super early in the game, before even the 10-minute mark of the first half. And I mean, you can't do that, man. That reaching out by the 3-point line, that was bad. That was a bad call. I mean, not a bad call. It was just a bad play by him. It needs to be able to not make those mistakes which he has made at times so far in the games up to this point. And I mean, just Samson Johnson, it's the same old issues which I've talked about, and many other people have talked about with Samson. It's just he I talked a little bit about how I thought maybe him not getting the easy looks that he was getting last year, just because of I don't want to say the inability, but the lack of playmaking that the guards on this UConn team kind of have, aside from Diarra. Uh, just not being able to get Samson in position to get those easy dunks and easy finishes that he was able to last year. I thought that maybe was getting to his head. But I mean, in the last 2 games, he's gotten a lot more of those looks, and I thought, maybe once he was able to finally get some of those, that he would be able to settle in a little bit and not hack as much. But I mean, he's still fouling a lot, and I think that's going to be something that's really, really crucial for this game against Gonzaga, where his ability to not foul Graham Ike is going to really dictate how this game is played. But yeah. So touching on Diarra too, I know I just mentioned his playmaking abilities. He had a career high 11 assists against Texas on Sunday, and I mean, it seems just like I understand the Aiden Mahaney experiment at point guard seems to have seems the hurt coaching staff has closed the door on that, and Ahmad Noel's been hurt the last two games, I believe, or maybe I can't remember if he was. I think he was dressed against. Yeah, he was dressed against Baylor, but he did not dress for the game against Texas. I think he was dealing with a shoulder injury, but but yeah, I mean, it seems that this coaching staff is really banking on kind of letting this starting lineup play for most of the game, aside from the five spot where Samson Johnson, Terrace Reed are going to be more by committee and split time and go matchup to matchup. But I mean, Caravan only sat for a minute on Sunday. Lee McNeely and Solo Ball both played, I want to say, around 35 minutes. I think Hassan Diar was also on the floor for the majority of the game, probably tallying around 35 minutes as well. And I mean, if that's what you got to do, I guess that's what you have to do. I think going into the season, a lot of people talked about the depth this team has as a strong suit. And I still believe this team is very deep. But right now, I don't think they have the depth that the coaching staff, I think, ideally would like, or maybe what they thought they were going to have at this point. But, Hurley talked about it. He talked about how him and his coaching staff need to coach this team differently than they have the past 2 years. I mean, he was coaching men last year. You had two fifth-year seniors playing in your backcourt, running the two and the one with Tristan Newton and Cam Spencer. I understand Stephon Castle was a freshman, but I mean, he was really mature beyond his years in terms of him being able to be a five-star freshman, come in and accept playing a role and playing defense, being tasked with guarding the other team's best perimeter offensive player. Klingon, he'd been there for 2 years and he was 7'2". I know Rob Dosser from Field 60 calls him the Great Wall of Bristol, and yeah, I mean that's just like and physically imposing how difficult it was for teams to play against UConn, knowing that Donovan Kling was going to be protecting the rim. And then, I mean, of course, you had Alex Caravan, who had been with the program and was really, really good in his role as a glue guy and just being able to space the floor and um, do a lot of the little things. So I think he just talked about that. This is a younger group that's going to have growing pains and obviously has had a lot of growing pains so far in the games played this year. And I mean, it's going to take time. I've said this. So many other people who have covered UConn this year have talked about this. This is a team that is very much a work in progress and are nowhere near a finished product. Um, I mean, you saw them in the Maui Invitational. I said the Maui Invitational was a perfect recipe for disaster, and I, still stand by that statement. I just think not being able, having to play 3 games in 3 days is really tough to not be able to go to your team and really try to correct a lot of the mistakes. That I think most people flagged about this team going into the season, and it's they were just not able to correct them just because of the time restrictions of having to play a game the next day, not being able to really have practice and really nail in these corrections that and fixes that this coach staff would have liked to make. And I think that's part of the reason why Dan Hurley came out and said he's probably never going to do another MTE as long as he's at UConn. So I understand his where he comes from when he says that. But yeah. So to talk a little bit more about the Texas game, they definitely I would definitely say I think I would say that this is probably the best game UConn has played this year. They came out extremely hot. They really took initiative in going to the basket and being able to hunt for shots and getting to the line early so that they could kind of allow them to ease themselves into games a little more than they have been in other games this year, where they kind of get off to those slow starts, those, kind of slow shooting starts from three. But I think them being able to get to the line was a really, really positive thing to see. And being able to see them kind of ease themselves to be able to get off to a hot start and jump out to a pretty big lead early on. I mean, this game for the most part was never very close. I believe once UConn took more than like a 12-point lead and never dropped under double digits. If I remember correctly, I could be mistaken, but there were several points throughout the game where I thought, okay, maybe Texas going on a little bit of a run, especially in that second half where they just couldn't miss from three coming out of the locker room, especially Trey Johnson. I mean, the kid's going to be really, really good the rest of the season, and he definitely should be in consideration for a top five pick in this year's draft. I think he posed a really tough matchup nightmare for this UConn team. It's kind of tough to, Dr is your kind of go to defender, but Trey Johnson just has the size advantage there, and I think Caravan did a fair job at the few times possessions where he had to switch on a Trey Johnson. I think he did a pretty admirable job in terms of because I think Trey Johnson is a little bit more of an athletic player than Alex Caravan, but I think Alex Caravan held his own against that and forced Trey Johnson to take some tough shots. But yeah, um, defensively they improved a lot more in at least in the first half. I think that first half was definitely a glimpse of the UConn basketball that I think everyone has come has become accustomed to over this past 2 or 3 years, in terms of like what the expectations are for the UConn program to play basketball. So yeah, I mean they played really well in that first half. Second half, they kind of. I mean, Texas was making a lot of tough shots, and you have to give Texas credit. They were making a lot of threes. They came out really hot in that second half. And I think, again, just UConn needs to become better guarding the perimeter. That's the number one thing that I think this team struggles with: fouling and offensive. My mistake, perimeter defense. Because I know they are. I know last I saw they were, I believe, number one in opponent 2 point and defending the 2 point shot in the country. I'm not sure if they're still at number one. They might be more in the top five. But uh, but yeah, it's just off in terms of guarding the perimeter, guarding 3 point shots. They're not a good team at that. They're not a good team in that stat right now, and that's something they got to work on because if you let a team like a Gonzaga get hot, they're going to light you up, and there's going to be teams in the Big East this year like a Creighton who can get super hot from three, and this or a Marquette with Cam Jones, and you can't let that happen, and that's going into the tournament too. Any team can get hot, and that you just need to really, really improve defensively. I think solo ball. I talked about this last week. Solo ball really improved in terms of his perimeter defense. I think he fought this game against Texas. Not only defensive, but he obviously brought it on the offensive end. I think he made 4 threes, I believe, in this game. And yeah, I mean, he's looking like he has a chance to really live up to that potential of having a Jordan Hawkins like freshman to sophomore leap. I know I talked about how and this game's a perfect example where he scored 16 and only had 1 rebound and 1 assist. But I kind of talked about how if solo ball is kind of only out there really to score, he doesn't really do much else. Um, from the games we've seen so far, that's kind of really all he's done, and it's almost felt like empty minutes in a way. Um, just because he's really only out there scoring and he's only out there to shoot. He doesn't bring much else. And I talk about how he needs to improve defensively, but I don't, as the more I think about it, I don't mind it if they kind of run this system where their starters are their guys. DR is just out there to pass and defend. I mean, that those are the two things he does best, in my opinion. And I think that's something that the coach staff should highlight. And I think that's what their idea is too. We just have him out there to be the distributor, play the point, and just defend. Um, and obviously you have your guys like your wings, Liam McNeely and Alex Caravan. Those guys are going to go out and be scorers for you. They're going to hit threes. And then you have your rotation of Samson Johnson, Terrace Reed. And then maybe solo ball is just your scorer. He's just another dimension you have on offense where maybe you ask him to put up 15 to 20 shots a night. And, he's shooting 46% from three this year. And he's been absolutely lighting it up in terms of his shooting. And I mean, that stroke is pure. And I think if you can, if he's just going to be out there to score, then I don't see why don't ask him to maybe just go out and fire up some more shots. Like I wouldn't be opposed to that because right now, again, kind of the empty stats in a way. He scored double digits in every game this year, and he has hit some really really big shots. But I think if he's not going to really be doing anything else for you in terms of playmaking, or you know, you hope he improves defensively. But I think if he's not going to be stronger in those fields, then maybe you ask him to go out and try to score even more than what he's been doing. And I think he's fully capable of doing that. And I don't see why he won't continue to shoot um, as hot as he has been shooting so far this season. So yeah, in this game, like I mentioned, the starters played for most of the game, and Jalen Stewart, Aiden Mahaney, and Jaden Ross all combined for a whopping 3 points. And I think that's something that's not very encouraging if you're a UConn fan, if you're the UConn coaching staff. Um, I talked about it last week. Just I'm really I was really impressed with Jalen Stewart in the Baylor game, where to me it really looked like he did a lot of the little things. And he was, I think I said I think he's really becoming a true baller, and he's kind of embracing this glue guy role. And I think, this is, he only played 8 minutes in this game. He had a three, didn't do anything else from worth noting from my memory. But I think he kind of gets it. He just needs to become more consistent in putting out the product on the floor that Dan Hurley and this coaching staff have tried to coach him to be able to be and show. I don't think Jaden Ross is there yet. He showed flashes of being that kind of, legit NBA prospect type of player in some of their, earlier games against, those teams that were outside the top 300 on Ken Palm. Um, and he's had a few highlight moments, like the poster dunk against Texas A&M, Southern, or Commerce, whatever they go by. I know they've changed the name of their school several times, but but yeah, he had some bad turnovers in this game. That he had some ugly plays, and it's just, I think you need to look for Jaden Ross to improve, because this is a guy who Dan Hurley came out and said if he was healthy on opening night, on banner night, he probably would have started. So that kind of shocked me when I heard it, and then I seen him play in some of those earlier games this season against um, kind of buyout games where you get the free win. And I'm just believing, I kind of believed it, that Jaden Ross was potentially going to be a dude for this team. I still think he can be, but I think you need to look out for the improvement that Jaden Ross and Jalen Stewart try to make going forward. Because, this sophomore class is going to be so crucial for this team, not only this year. I know the NBA question is going to be up in the air about these three guys going into next season, but if you're able to return all three, or even two, they're going to be so crucial next season, because those are guys who are, kind of this new wave of UConn guys, the new UConn, hope to be stars. And I don't see why not. Why they can't be, because the recruiting class, last year's freshman class was super talented. You had Steph Castle, Solo Ball, who's already making an impact as a starter and shooting the lights out from three. And then Jalen Stewart, Jaden Ross, and Yusuf Sangare, which just a quick shout out to Yusuf Sangare, who got some minutes in this game because of the foul trouble from the centers. Yusuf, I think you feel a lot more comfortable that you're up around 20 points when Yusuf has to go into the game because of foul trouble. But I think that was good, just to be able to, let him get a little bit of a run and kind of being able to get out on the floor and kind of try to develop a little bit. But he's got a little bit of a foul problem too. He picked up four pretty quick in that first half. But it was fun to see the Yusuf minutes. So I definitely do commend him for um playing fairly well. And he didn't do anything. He didn't make any bonehead plays. He had some bad fouls, but other than that, he played pretty well. Given the given situation. But yeah. So that wave of freshmen, those guys are going to be super important for this program, and they're going to get better as the season goes on and going into next year too. And with Mahaney, he only got 6 minutes in this game, which was a little bit shocking, just because he arguably had his best game of the season against Baylor. And you thought, with Hurley's calling him the Phoenix and everything, you thought maybe, okay, Mahaney's here now, he's arrived. But then you turn around, he played 6 minutes against Texas, and I just think that it might have been a little bit tough of a matchup in terms of being able to play him in minutes in a large volume of minutes, just because going into this game, Texas was a sneaky top 20 defense on Ken Palm. And, they have size with their guards. So I think, Mahaney struggles a little bit against defensive pressure and size. And I think maybe that posed a little bit of a matchup problem. But I mean, still, it was a little shocking to see UConn get up to such a large lead on Texas and still not see any Mahaney minutes. But, I think that could potentially set them up for this matchup tomorrow against Gonzaga. So let's get into that. I think that pretty much covers everything I had to take away from this Texas game on Sunday. So yeah, let's talk about Gonzaga. Um, so UConn plays Gonzaga on the date of this recording. It'll be tomorrow, but by the time you guys see it, it'll be Saturday. So it'll be tonight. UConn plays Gonzaga at Madison Square Garden, STORRS South. UConn fans do travel very well, so I assume this will almost be like a UConn home game. I'm sure Gonzaga, there's plenty of Gonzaga fans in New York. So, but I think UConn should probably have the home court advantage in this game. But yeah, this is I talked about it in I talked about 2 episodes ago, I believe, where after going 0-3 in the Maui, you still have Baylor, Texas, and Gonzaga to round out your out of conference schedule. And I said if you win 2 out of those 3, I think you put yourself in a really good position going into Big East play. And well, here we are with UConn winning back-to-back games against Baylor and Texas, and now with a potential win tomorrow over Gonzaga, UConn puts himself in a position to arguably be back in the committee's eyes as a true national championship contender. And I think this game tomorrow is going to tell us a lot about this UConn team. Just with being able to beat Texas and Baylor and then have a full week of prep to try to game plan for Ryan Nemhard and Graham Ike and Mark Few and his whole Gonzaga game plan, because Gonzaga is a top 5 offense in the country. They have really large guards, which I've talked about, and I think they address their needs in the portal like very well this offseason. They have size in the backcourt now, which they kind of didn't have last year, and a lot of people pointed as to one of the problems that this Gonzaga team had. They have Ryan Nemhard, who I understand isn't the tallest, but he's arguably the best point guard in the country right now, and he's probably not leading the race for the Bob Cousy Award. He's the guy who's averaging 10 points, 11, 10, 11, maybe 12 points, and 10 assists. And he's probably the most poised and elite playmaker in the country right now. You have Graham Ike, who's kind of been up and down this season, but is definitely good at drawing fouls and is going to pose a problem for Samson Johnson and Terrace Reed on Saturday. 2 guys who kind of have been in foul trouble for almost every game this season and need to become more disciplined. So that's going to be something to watch in this game. Gonzaga also has Khalif Battle, the transfer from Arkansas, who's played really well this year. And, really, I think kind of taking on a role of being able to, kind of play more defense and kind of not always be out there to look to score every possession the way he did at Arkansas last season. And I think, he's improved as a playmaker too, I think, this year, where here and there you'll be able to get, see a nice pass or see a nice play made by Khalif Battle. And then you have Michael Ajayi, who I think probably looks like the best legit NBA type of prospect that Gonzaga has on their team. And, he hasn't even reached his full potential yet as a player. So I think that's, definitely going to be something to watch for the Zags this season. And who knows, maybe tomorrow is kind of that breakout game for Ajayi. So that's definitely going to be something that could pose some matchup problems for UConn. Again, in terms of their defense, UConn has been getting beat off the dribble by guards every game this season, all season long. And I mean, when you're playing against a guy like a Ryan Nemhard, who's one of the best pick and roll players in the country, and struggled a little bit against the zone, which Mark Pope in Kentucky threw at them. Struggled a little bit against West Virginia, and I think that's UConn isn't a team that plays zone. Dan Hurley's adamant about playing tough, physical man defense, and I just think if they're not locked in defensively and they're not sticking to their assignments, they're not communicating, calling out screens, then this could get ugly for UConn if they stick to that man the whole game and they are not fully focused in on guarding the ball and calling out screens. And being disciplined in terms of their fouling and not hacking. This could get ugly very fast for UConn. But I think if maybe it does start to get a little meek at times, then maybe you could try to throw a 1-3-1 zone at them, kind of similar to what Kentucky and Mark Pope did in their game, which they were able to come back from, I believe it was 16 or 18 down at half, and ultimately win an OT, which was a really big win for Mark Pope in that Kentucky program. But yeah, I think that's going to be really crucial for the in this game. Ryan Nemhard, you need a shot. You can't let Ryan Nemhard dictate the pace of this game. If you're able to let Ryan Nemhard kind of dictate this basketball game, then you're just setting yourself up for failure. They need to be able to make Ryan Nemhard uncomfortable because outside of him, they really don't have many other playmakers. It's different when guys hunt their zones to be able to get shots, but Ryan Nemhard kind of attacks to get to his spots to be able to pass. And even, I understand UConn struggles when trying to guard guards who like taking you off the dribble. But if Ryan Nemhard is, still able to take these guards off the UConn's guards tomorrow off the dribble, as long as they close out on shooters and they're able to get into passing lanes in the half court and kind of make it tough on Nemhard to be able to make these passes. And I think they put themselves in a really, really good position to be able to try to win this basketball game. And additionally, I mean, I don't want to jinx it or anything, but this is a Gonzaga team that when they're hot, they're hot. They have a fair amount of decent shooters. Dusty Stromer, I know Khalif Battle can step out and hit it. Nemhard's really improved as a shooter over his career at Gonzaga, as well as Noah Hickman, who I believe is around a career 40% 3-point shooter, if I'm not mistaken. So he's a guy who's kind of up and down, but can hit shots when he's hot. And but I almost think that UConn could be in the mindset where they go out and dare Gonzaga to shoot to win the game. I mean, again, if Gonzaga gets hot, they're really tough to beat. But they have up and down hot and cold streaks where they can't hit a shot for stretches, and then they have their stretches where they doesn't seem like they can miss. But I think if you're able to play defense and kind of force them to take these threes and take these tough jump shots, and you put yourself in a really, really good position in terms of how you play defensively, because this is going to be I think a fairly high scoring game in my opinion. These are two top five Ken Palm offenses who are going to be battling. I think many people going into the season were hoping that the polls worked out so this would end up being a potential 1 versus 2 matchup. It's obviously not how the polls ended up playing out at all. Both these teams went through some tough stretches. UConn more so with the Maui, and Gonzaga with losing to West Virginia and Tucker DeVries, and then dropping a game to Mark Pope in Kentucky. But in terms of more so what I think you want to see out of UConn, aside from continued defensive improvement, which they are going to try to build upon from their better defensive performances against Baylor and Texas, I think you also need to kind of see another guy like really emerge. I think it really does have a chance to be Liam McNeely. Just talking like I talked about it last week. Liam McNeely took it upon himself. He saw Alex Caravan was going to be out with a concussion again against Baylor. He kind of took it out. He didn't shoot it well, and he's really he was a little bit quiet scoring wise against Texas, but he hasn't even shot it well yet. But he's already growing in terms of doing more of like the little things, like the rebounding and being able to. Yeah, he'll get beat at times, but he's done a lot better of a job recovering and being able to get blocks. And I mean, he hits the big shots. He hit those big threes against Baylor, those big jump shots, specifically that one in transition where he brought it down and pulled up from the left wing and hit that 3-pointer. And I think just seeing him take it upon himself to kind of be a leader in that game was really, really encouraging to see. Um, I think solo ball, if he continues to shoot the way he has, then he's going to be a guy who definitely could leap up draft boards this year. Um, and I mean, I think he's got to be kind of like one of those guys this year for UConn, kind of like what Jordan Hawkins was 2 years back. Solo ball can continue to try to follow along this Jordan Hawkins type leap of leap timeline. Then I think he puts himself in a really good position to be a big time player for this UConn program. And again, I mentioned the NBA question is going to be up in the air. We don't know if what he's thinking in this current his current mind state and what it's going to be at the end of the season. But yeah, I definitely think he's played well in terms of shooting the ball. And I think you just look for him to try to add more to what he's doing. If he's able to attack closeouts more often, I talked about this last week. I think that'll add a complete new dimension to his game. And then if he's able to attack these closeouts and then he could kick it out, you still have other shooters around. You have Caravan, McNeely, Diarra if he's open. And I think that would do so much offensively for this team. I mean, yeah, I think just continued improvement from Jalen Stewart and Jaden Ross, just trying to see those guys continue to prove and be kind of like the next wave of those UConn names, those stars. And just with Mahaney, I mean, this is a guy who I think has the chance to, I understand, I could see people calling that Baylor game kind of his breakout game, but he had a down game against Texas where he barely played, but this is UConn's playing the team that Aiden Mahaney made a name for herself in Moraga, California, playing against. He played in the West Coast Conference, who plays Gonzaga twice a year. They meet in the West Coast Conference tournament. Um, his freshman season, Aiden Mahaney single-handedly beats Gonzaga. Last year, Aiden Mahaney was the MVP of the West Coast Conference tournament, and St. Mary's beat Gonzaga in the WCC championship game, and he lit them up. He's been known as a Gonzaga killer his whole college career. And, this is kind of a point where I thought maybe after that Baylor game, people would kind of think that he's back or he's kind of reassert himself as a true player. But then you see the staff not see him, not feel it was right to play him uh, high volume of minutes against Texas, which was kind of unexpected for me coming off that big game he had against Baylor. But I think this he has a legitimate chance. This is a team which I understand Gonzaga, the roster has changed a little bit from last year and definitely from the year before, but he knows some of their players. He knows a little bit about how they play. He knows how Mark Few runs his team, and yeah, I think he's probably had this game circled on his calendar from the moment he's transferred to UConn, and the schedules came out, and I think he really has a chance to legitimately show the world, show UConn fans that you shouldn't write him off and you shouldn't completely cross him out as being a potential big time player for this UConn program and this UConn team. I'm already hearing murmurs. People think he's going to transfer out at the end of the season. And I'm not one to speculate or really jump on rumors or anything. And I understand he hasn't played as well as I think he's like to up to this point. And you don't know how the rest of the season is going to play out. But he talked about this in his interviews where he said a big reason why he transferred to UConn was to be put in uncomfortable situations. He had played 30 minutes away from his hometown of Lafayette in Moraga, California, where he could drive home for the weekend and no problem. And he wanted to get outside of his comfort zone. He wanted to play for a coach who was going to push him to grow not only as a basketball player, but as a person. And I think he's probably had the roughest stretch of his collegiate career so far in his time playing as a Husky. And I mean, I think to be able to sometimes to be able to take a step forward, you need to take a step back. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing. And I've talked about it so much where it's so hard for freshmen and first year transfers to be able to pick up and understand Dan Hurley's offensive sets and defensive schemes right away. And I think it's been really unfair to see the critiques and criticisms that college basketball fans and specifically UConn fans, it's been really rough. Some of the things I've seen a lot of UConn fans say about Mahaney. I think it's completely unfair and really disappointing to see out of a fan base that I think has really become toxic over the last 2 seasons when I kind of regarded UConn as one of the better fan bases and one of the cooler fan bases in college basketball. So, that's I guess that's my PSA. I think UConn fans have been a little bit spoiled with the teams the last 2 seasons. I think they need a reality check that this is normal college basketball. You're not just going to be dominant year in and year out. This is the realistic truth of what college basketball is. You're not going to dominate every season. You're going to have setbacks. You're going to have growing pains, and this is what we're seeing with this UConn team right now. But I think back to last year. Obviously, he didn't struggle necessarily at all, or even close to the point that I think Mahaney has this year. But Cam Spencer, I think, was I don't want to say quiet. I don't think that that was the right word, but maybe not as pronounced as a player for UConn really until that UNC game last year in the Jimmy V Classic at the Garden, where he went toe to toe with Armando Bacot, talking trash to him. I think he picked up a tech in that game too, where he kind of played a bad game at Allen Fieldhouse against Kansas and turned around the next game and said, you know what, like screw it, I'm going to go out and I'm going to win us this game, and he balled out that game and he shot the ball amazing and was fired up, talking trash and everything. Getting the energy in the Garden up will definitely a ton. And I think, I look at this game tomorrow against Gonzaga as a chance for Ada Mahaney to do something like that too, where obviously Cam wasn't really struggling the way Mahaney has, but I think Mahaney has a chance to really show UConn fans and the rest of the country what he's capable of doing, and what he has the chance to do for this UConn team. And I think John Fanta had a really great take on this on the CT Scoreboard podcast, where he was saying that Mahaney needs to play more free. I think he's too worried about um, kind of playing too between the lines and sticking to the textbook rather than kind of playing more freely the way he did at St. Mary's and the role he was in at St. Mary's. I think Ada Mahaney's a lot better when he's in the mindset of being able to attack and go to the basket and kind of, dribble around defenders and hit those mid-range jump shots, and then be able to have that confidence to be able to step out and hit that three. Because, he wasn't really a spot up catch and shoot type of guy at St. Mary's. Of course, he shot well every time they played Gonzaga, specifically in the West Coast Conference championship game last year. But I think he's a lot better when he's in the mindset of being able to handle the ball and kind of be an attack mindset and being able to seek out those shots and go to the rim. And I think if you're able to see him I think right now he's kind of just in the mindset he's trying to figure out where his role really is with this UConn team and what he can do to really benefit the team the most. But I think if he's able to really kind of just like play more free and not be so worried about having to be perfect, I think that'll do so much for his confidence. It'll do so much for his play, and I think it's going to do so much for this UConn team and program. So I think that covers pretty much everything. I know I kind of went on about Mahaney for a lot at the end, but yeah, I think just overall tomorrow's game is going to be really fun. Hopefully not a blowout in Gonzaga's favor. I'm hoping UConn is able to play up to par with this Gonzaga team. It looks like, I talked about it. I thought they were, to me, looking like the best team in college basketball. I don't think so anymore, just because of their struggles in the last few games. But, I think this is going to be a really big game for both programs. Gonzaga dropped that game against the DeVries father-son duo and West Virginia, and then obviously dropping that game to Kentucky against Mark Pope in OT after having a large lead in both games actually going into the half. But, I think if they lose this game, then there's definitely going to be some turmoil and some questions around this Gonzaga program. And, if UConn loses this game, it's tough because I don't think your resume stacks up as nicely as you would like to, because I just think Baylor isn't the team everyone really thought they were going to be going to the season. And, Texas, Texas, that was a quad one win. So you can't look down on it. Texas was a sneaky top 20 team on KenPom, but, they didn't look very great in that game against UConn either. So there's definitely going to be a very large, if they're able to win, it could definitely be a really, really large resume building win for UConn this season heading into Big East play. If they lose, I don't think it's the end of the world. You just really have to lock in and get what needs to get done in Big East play as a potential top three favorite contender type of team in the Big East this year. I know Cam Jones and Marquette's definitely looking like the favorites in the Big East as we speak right now. I know Creighton lost Pop Isaacs for the year. Brutal blow to them, and really unfortunate to see, as he was really starting to play very well, especially in that game against Kansas. But it sucks to see that. But yeah, I think if you win tomorrow, huge. If you lose, it's not the end of the world. But this is kind of our last taste of, or being able to see how good this UConn stacks up nationally against the rest of the country, before we'll eventually, hopefully, see them in the tournament this season. So I think it's going to take care of everything. Again, if you like this podcast and the content on this channel, please rate, review, subscribe, share with your friends. All helps with the algorithm. And I mean, the game's on Saturday and it's at 8 p.m. I think I'm going to try to maybe at the conclusion of the game record a quick reaction video to that to the Gonzaga game, or if not, maybe we'll do a one time or do a little bit of surprise Sundays and Stores episode instead. I want to get one video out before Big East play starts, just to react to this Gonzaga game and try to break down the what to look for UConn to do heading into the Big East play. So that's going to take care of everything. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next episode.